Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. I'm the Gym Philosopher, and today we're talking about a big question that has been raised. Will D&D 5e last forever, or will it get replaced soon? I recently published a video on my channel talking about D&D 5e and basically asking, is it dying? Is it just not working out, or is it going well? And I got a bunch of comments. Well, I actually boiled down all those comments into three complaints. The top three complaints about 5e and the top three strengths based on my user base, people who commented on my videos. So I'm excited to share this data with you. We're going to examine these, see if D&D 5e, especially in 2025, has the staying power to make it last. Let's dive in. You're not going to want to miss this. Welcome back to another episode of GM Philosophy in the Morning. If you are here because you are a game master looking to improve your game master craft, well, you're in the right place. Hit that thumbs up button, smash that subscribe button. The goal here at GM Philosophy is to help game masters run better games. I also want to give you something today. I recently wrote this ebook, Mastering the Game, 10 Essential GM Tips and How to Take Them to the Next Level. These are my top 10 tips going deep into game master craft. This is a brief 7-page ebook. When you sign up for my email list, this comes free in the first email. You get the download link. This may be one of the fastest ways to take your game from zero to hero overnight. These are tips I've learned over 20 plus years of running games. So boom, I hope that you enjoy that. Now it's time to ask the all-important question, will D&D 5e last forever or get replaced soon? I think this matters to a lot of us because we've been hearing a lot of complaints about 5e. We've also been hearing a lot of good things. There's a lot of people who are kind of on the fence about it. There are a lot of people who don't like it, but I think that there are more people who do like it, just in my experience. With that being said, I have boiled all of the comments I received on that previous video about whether or not 5e was dying out, and I've condensed them down into the top three complaints and the top three strengths. Let's dive right in. This is going to give us some interesting insights. So let's go over the complaints first. Number one complaint I hear in my comments about 5e. Several comments alluded to disliking Hasbro's sticky fingers in their wallets and the idea of paying for digital subscriptions or services without truly owning the content. In other words, there's skepticism toward the perceived corporate emphasis on extracting money from players. I really pick up on this. I hear a lot of people talk about this. The skepticism about the corporatization of the game we know and love has a lot of people wondering if D&D has just gone too far away from what it was intended to be. It was always intended to be a game you could whip out and play with your players at the dining room table. Didn't really cost very much money. In fact, back in the old days, it really didn't cost nearly anything. You can still play TTRPGs today with zero cost. With a little bit of money spent, you can get a lot of free resources. You can get dice. You can basically get rolling, all kinds of free stuff to play with. But if you want to play legit D&D, well, it's going to cost you these days. That's the number one complaint. Let's go on to complaint number two. Minimal changes between editions. Some commenters on my channel have noted that the newer editions, like 5.5, don't feel different enough from older editions to justify repeated purchases. They'd rather stick with what they've already bought than spend more on what they view as slightly changed rules. And I think this kind of goes back to, well, whether it's third edition or fourth edition or fifth edition, it's still D&D. Maybe it's not different enough to warrant putting out these new releases, which some people in the community see as being a cash grab. Now, is this enough to cause D&D to die out of existence? Is this going to begin to spell the end of the game as we know it? Well, that remains to be seen. What's your opinion? Drop a comment and let me know. I would love to hear what you think. Now let's go on to complaint number three. Subscription model service frustrations. The gripe about paying a monthly fee for something like D&D Beyond and losing access if you stop paying also came up in my comments. There's a strong thread of this. It dovetails with the broader complaint that digital content isn't truly owned, which can turn players off if they prefer tangible, permanent materials. Listen, let's face it, D&D players love their books. They love their dice. They love to have things in their hand. They love cool artwork artwork. They love to flip through the pages. Now, obviously, a lot of us play virtual tabletop, but I still use my books when I play virtual. I'm flipping through my book, I'm flipping through my monster manual. And I think that a lot of gamers share that. I think it's different to scroll through an ebook. And anyway, when you pay for a subscription model, you don't really own it. You just own access to it for the month that you paid. So that is definitely a complaint. It's interesting how a lot of these complaints have to do with like the money structure around it, not the price of the game. I haven't heard very many complaints actually about the cost of, like, for example, the player's handbook. What I have heard is complaints about how that money transaction is handled. There's the corporatization of it. There's the recurring charges. There's the subscription fees, etc. Now, is this enough to cause D&D to die out? Is this enough to cause D&D as we know it to get replaced by something else? There are other systems that are vying for that spot. Nothing really comes close to the popularity of D&D today, but we see things like Shadow Dark, which you buy one book and you can pretty much run with it. Pretty simple, very streamlined combat. Definitely no recurring memberships required. And that's just one of like dozens of possible alternatives. There are some even free alternatives online. But of course, the free versions and these alternative versions are not Dungeons and Dragons. Is Dungeons and Dragons going to go by the wayside to make more room for these things? This remains to be seen. Let's move on to talk about the good things people said in the comments, though, about D&D 5e. So interestingly, one of the big strengths of 5e was seemingly the solid, streamlined mechanics. This is what commenters were saying on my channel. In particular, commenters explicitly praised 5e as the superior product mechanically, especially compared to older editions. They said they enjoy how it plays and find it easier to learn or run than some of the earlier rule sets. Strength number 2, easy to homebrew and integrate. A lot of people seem to like how 5e allows for simpler house rules and the ease of dropping custom content into digital tools. Even those running older editions said they borrowed a few 5e concepts and integrated them into the homebrew, underscoring 5e's flexibility. And then strength number 3, accessible for returning and new players. A lot of commenters were talking about the fact that longtime players coming from 2nd edition or 3rd edition can pick up 5e relatively quickly. And this speaks to its accessibility. More streamlined rules and abundant online resources make it less intimidating for old hands returning to the hobby or newcomers jumping in for the first time. Now, here's a question, though. Are these strengths enough to save it when we weigh the problems with the upsides? This is a great question, and I want to talk for just a minute about this. But before I do, I just want to invite you to our GM Philosophy Discord. If you want to become a better game master, if you want to talk to other game masters, network, run games, attend events, that'll help you to improve your game master craft, then the GM Philosophy Discord is the place to be. You can find a link in the description to our official event calendar. Find out what kind of events we have going on all week long, every single week to help game masters. And you can find a link in the description to our GM Philosophy Game Master Journey, basically a 7-step process that will take you from beginner to absolutely legendary in your game master journey. Like I said, it's all about empowering game masters to run better games that are more fun for themselves and their players. All right, now let's jump in and discuss the pros and cons, and I'm going to give you my 2 cents on the matter. So if the question is, will D&D last forever or will it get replaced soon? Well, this is kind of a complicated question. We know that Dungeons & Dragons has released several versions. There was the initial version, there was AD&D, 3rd edition, 4th edition, and 3rd edition had a revised version, right? So we know that there have been different versions. What are the odds that 5e is actually going to last forever? The odds are not very good. I mean, what we're looking at is probably like 10-ish years. We already have 2014 to 2024, 10 years of 5e going. So maybe 10 more years, maybe that. I would be really surprised if 5e goes a whole additional 10 years. But it's actually looking like it might. Getting the updated version literally 10 years later is pretty big. It's kind of cool. It's actually a pretty cool thing to see happen. I feel like this gave 5e kind of a whole new life, this 5e revised version. And I kind of feel like this sets it up along with like the source books that have already come out and the fact that they're still putting out source books and they're investing so much into D&D Beyond. This makes me feel like 5e is probably set to stay a lot longer than maybe even previous versions. Now, previous versions were here for quite a long time. For example, when we look at a timeline, we see that in 1974, the original edition of D&D came out. And then in 1995, a D&D came out. So we're looking at 75, 85, 95, over 20 years, right? Then we have in the year 2000, D&D 3rd edition came out. And then in 2003, the revised version. So there was only 3 years in that span of time. And then it went on another 5 years before 2008 when 4th edition came out. And then, of course, in 2014, D&D 5th edition came out. So 4th edition actually went from 2008 to 2014. So that's 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 6 years. So D&D just got an update. That's 10 years. This is basically a revised version. And it looks like there's a lot in development for 5e with D&D Beyond and stuff. So I would not be surprised if D&D is actually around for, I actually think it might be around another 10 years, honestly. Although I would say maybe putting a more realistic number on it, maybe 6 years. I think that maybe, when we see D&D Beyond has been a thing for 6 years from today, that feels like quite a length of time. It feels like there will probably be a new version coming out somewhere. My prediction would be around 2030, maybe 2031 is when we can expect a new version. And that's just me spitballing. Will 5e be replaced soon? I don't think so. I think we're going to have 5e 2024 until at least 2030, 2031, and maybe even longer than that. It depends on how much investment goes into D&D Beyond. And 2024 made it really easy to make source material in the form of like subclasses. And it's just really clean. Will Wizards of the Coast make 5e the big final version? And they're just going to add on to it. I find this hard to believe. I don't think that's a very sustainable business model. Another question is, if D&D continues to run as is it eventually going to get a bigger competitor? There are a lot of other games which, to be really honest, when you add them all together, they don't even rival the market share that D&D has. D&D is like the big heavy hitter in the high fantasy TTRPG world. With that being said, could some of these lighter editions, some of these smaller editions possibly come up and start to rival 5e, especially when, if we go back to the complaints we talked about in the beginning, corporate monetization concerns, minimal changes between editions, subscription service model frustrations. These complaints could lead to more people jumping ship and going for things like Shadow Dark, Nimble, or any number of other systems that are out there. So long story short, that's my prediction. I think that we're looking at 2030, 2031 for sure before we see a new edition. I do think we're going to have a new edition. Do I think that there's going to be other systems that are going to rival D&D in the meantime? Is 5e going to get usurped by a smaller game system? I have to say, I don't think that's very likely. I don't think that's going to happen. I do believe that these smaller game systems, these smaller TTRPG systems, these books, I think that there is a possibility for them to get a little more popular. I think there's a possibility to see more people using them, but I don't think they're going to actually, even put together, probably start to rival D&D. D&D is just so massive. But we'll see what happens when 2031 comes around. If D&D loses any customer base significantly over the course of the next 5 years, that would change the outcome. But I don't think it's going to happen, honestly. I think 5e is too good. I really like 5e. I kind of hope it sticks around. I kind of hope it's the final version. I don't think that I'm going to get that wish, though, because that doesn't really work as a business model unless they do a subscription-based thing. And I don't know that people are going to pay for that. I think people will just keep playing 2014 5e. And, then there's really not any money in it. So a new version would probably be a more profitable vision for the future for D&D. I want to talk about one more thing before we're done with this video. I want to give a huge shout out to our Ko-Fi sponsors, Ko-Fi community members, especially our latest gold level supporter, Craig. Craig, thank you so much for sponsoring the content, for sponsoring the activities on the Discord and in the email list and everything else. Your support is very, very appreciated. Thank you so much. If you'd like to become a Ko-Fi supporter, unlock access to our ebook library, access to our masterclass courses, access to many other awesome resources. Link to that is in the description. And with that being said, that's going to be a wrap for this one. Thank you so much for coming back for another episode of GM Philosophy in the Morning. I'm here every single day talking about how to take your Game Master game to the next level, how to increase your skills and crush it at the gaming table. Roll some D100s for me at your next game, and I will see you awesome people on the next one.